Much everyone for attending today's Development Management Committee meeting. May I start from the right hand side to introduce all our fellow colleagues and we'll work our way around. Councillor?
Good evening, I'm Councillor Ash Sutcliffe representing Horsfield and Waldside in Col.
Sarah Coburn-Price representing Woolsworth and Borwick.
David Gaddy, good evening, representing Barford and Pendleside.
Mohammed Aslam, Bradley Ward Councillor.
Councillor Underbell, Vibery Bridge.
David Whip, I'm an EB and Coatswold councillor.
Councillor Zafar Ali, representing Briarfield East and Clover Hill.
Naeem Ashraf, representing Bradfield East and Clover Hill.
Mohammed Iqbal, representing Bradley Ward.
Yvonne Tennant representing Marsden and Southfield.
Joan Eccles, a committee administrator at Tennant Council.
I'm Councillor Fraz Ahmed representing Wolverton and Whitefield. And my colleague to the right.
Hi, I'm Neil Watson. I'm the planning manager for Pendle.
Thank you very much. Okay, item number 1, declarations of interest. Any declarations? No, thank you very much. Item number 2, to approve the meeting minutes of the last meeting that were held on the 17th of June.
Move
Anyone second that?
Second.
All in favour? Thank you very much. Planning applications. What I wanted to do was, obviously we've got a listing of all the planning applications, and I thought we'd bring a couple forward, because there are a couple of long ones as well. So if I can bring planning application number 250293 FUL forward. It's a full retention of a racing pigeon loft and replacement of former loft at 8 Albert Street, Nelson. There is one speaker, Mohammed Asif, who wasn't supposed to be here, but I have got a message to speak on his behalf. If you just bear with me. What's that?
Page 21.
Yeah, so it's basically saying, dear councillors, I apologise due to last minute emergency, I cannot attend in person. I would ask you to approve our application as it's been there for a number of years and is causing nobody any issues. We are not a big commercial racing pigeon racers, but a few local people who have a hobby and enjoy the tranquility of this after work and in our days off. We don't cause a problem to anyone and would be grateful for your kind support. That's Mohammed Asif, the applicant. Councillor David Whip.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, we have had a site visit, as we've site visited all the rest of the application.
Yep.
And I hope we can find some wriggle room to allow this pigeon loft to remain. I often go down Albert Street and I often, no, not often, I go to Manshire quite a bit, and I've never ever noticed the pigeon loft, which is on the back street and is quite obscure. It's not in your face. When you go onto the back street, it's quite an impressive structure. But I don't think that given the circumstances, that it would be reasonable for us to turn this down. There was apparently a pigeon loft there for anything between 11 and 13 years. Because there was roof repairs carried out, they replaced the structure, and I think that's what's caused it to fall foul. Oh, pardon me, we're trying to avoid the puns. It caused it to fall foul of the policy. Chairman, if the pigeon loft that have been there for 11 to 13 years had remained unaltered, then it would be exempt from enforcement action, and it would be something that the council just had to accept. So my view is that we ought to approve this. I think that it's not a beam in your eye sort of thing, which is a total excrescence, but it's something that is out of the way, not noticeable from general passers-by to any extent whatsoever. And I hope that we can find enough flexibility in order to approve this. and I would move that we do.
Thank you so much. Councillor Mohammed Iqbal, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm happy to second Councillor Whip. I mean, I don't frequent Manchester as frequently as he does. But in terms of the loft and the pigeon, I mean, he's right that if you didn't know there was a pigeon loft there, you would just walk past it or drive past it. I mean, I'm aware that there is, and there's been one there for a number of years. I mean, in terms of the site itself, the applicant himself runs the business that's downstairs, and I think as he's said in his message, that it's a hobby, this, not a commercial activity. You know, none of the neighbours have objected. I mean, I've spoken to neighbours over the weekend as well and knocked on every door, and people just don't have an issue with it and say, you know, in fact, it's fine. So I'm happy to second that with their colleagues to support the approval.
Thank you very much. Councillor Sarah Corbyn-Price, please.
Well, you'd expect me, because I'm always speaking in great support of the Whitefield Conservation Area, and we have a lot of applications to come forward that dilute its importance. An awful lot of money and time was spent really just showing it to be the Victorian pearl that it is. And I would agree that it is down a back street, and so therefore is less obvious than perhaps if it was there on, I don't know, front roof slope or something. But for me, it's all laid out very clearly on page 23, all the reasons why in this valuable conservation area this shouldn't be happening. I am not going to propose a motion against your motion, just simply because I don't think anyone else will support me. But I just wanted to say that I feel that we need to protect our conservation areas, and it's just chipping away time after time, one thing after another, and I would say that this is another example of it. It doesn't matter whether it's commercial or it's a hobby, it is the conservation area that needs protection.
Thank you. Councillor Zafar Ali.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I take on board the views held by Councillor Corbyn-Price, but I think I'm heavily weighted by the argument set out by Councillor Whip and Iqbal. Obviously, I don't represent the particular ward in question, but I have been approached even by residents in passing whilst I was at Manchester as well. And people who were like, well, we've not really got any issues with this proposal. And as colleagues have pointed out, you know, this isn't something that's turned up yesterday. It's been there, I think, close to 15 years. I think Councillor Whip mentioned 11 to 13 years. Nevertheless, yes, Councillor Corbyn-Price is right. You know, we need to protect the conservation area, but I don't think this particular proposal damages it. And certainly there haven't been any remarks to that effect in the report as far as the public is concerned. And I think sometimes, in my view, I'm genuinely pressured by residents to go in a particular way because of how they feel, and the fact that no responses have come forward from the public suggests that the people in that area who are mostly going to be affected by this proposal are happy with it. So I'm happy to support the proposal to move for approval of the application.
Thank you. Councillor Naim Ashraf.
Chair, I'm not going to carry on saying what colleagues have said, what Councillor Councillor Zafar said. However, I think for me, the most impressive thing about this thing is that we have, and I think people are aware, so many different people from different areas actually coming just to have a look at this, and the actual sites, and obviously the pigeon sporters who like pigeons and everything, who have them in Blackburn and all these sort of areas as well. So it's a bit of an attraction as well at the same time, Chair. So I will definitely be supporting it.
Thank you so much. Councillor Yvonne Tennant.
I was just going to say, I actually live in the Whitefield Conservation Area. I didn't know it was there. In fact, when we went to see it today, I was the first one on site, and when the other councillors were turning up, they were saying, what we're looking at, and I was like, that's up there. So it's not obtrusive, it's not immediately like, what's that huge great structure, doesn't it make it look awful? So I'd be inclined to approve as well. Plus, pigeon racing's a heritage thing, which I think fits into the conservation area. I'm sure there were a lot more pigeon locks there in the past. So.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bell.
Yeah, I can actually say I'm biased because my stepfather is a very keen pigeon racer, if you like, but that's over in Barrion. But I take on board exactly what Councillor Sarah Corbyn-Price said today about it is a conservation area. But one of the things that struck me when I got there was it's quite muted. It's not in your face, and it's not blatantly obvious it's there. It's like Councillor Yvonne said, it had to be pointed out it was there. So I'd be quite happy to go along with this project.
Cool. Councillor Mohammed Aslam.
Yeah, I'm also in favour. The only one thing I see is a shed which we can hardly see from the back street, but there's 4 times more pigeons sitting on Palatine. So if you talk about pigeons, and there's 4 times more pigeons are sitting on the top of Palatine. So, there's the 2 issues. So whenever you see, there's not many pigeons there anyway. So
Sure.
I'm all in favour.
Thank you. Councillor Aslam, we'll have to put a planning application for Palatine. So if we're happy to move for progress, Councillor David Whip.
Yeah, just to respond to the debate, really. I do think that colleagues who were suggesting that this was a tourist attraction were over-egging the pudding, rather. But I do think it brings life and vitality to the area. And I do need to declare an interest because I also frequent Adams, the curry house on the corner where this is below. I think the reason, looking at it from the point of view of the conservation area, the reason why I think this is acceptable is that location is not a prominent location from the public space. So, if it was somewhere else, I would probably turn around and say, well, oh, hang on a minute, that is completely inappropriate, and it really is obscure, and I think that's the reason why it's acceptable.
Thank you very much. Are we happy to move for progress? Councillor David Whip to approve, Councillor Mohammed Iqbal to second. All in favour? Thank you very much. That's passed. Okay, the second planning application I wanted to move forward was a full conversion of the vacant church, which is F1, into 6 residential flats and other associated works at St Peter and St Paul's Roman Catholic Church. We've got 3 people here willing to speak, 3 speakers. It is a maximum of 5 minutes each, and I'm happy to start with Will Rogers.
Yep.
Who's the agent? Thank you, Will.
Just from here.
Yeah, you're fine.
Yeah, cool. Thank you. Good evening, members. I'm here today to present our proposal for the conversion of a vacant church to 6 flats. This project aims to revitalise the unused building, providing much needed housing whilst preserving the historical essence of the structure. The church has been vacant since 2019 and is deteriorating. Our proposal seeks to breathe new life into the building, ensuring its preservation. The conversion aligns with local planning policies, which favour residential development in this location, especially with the council unable to demonstrate a 5-year land supply. The structure of the church allows for a relatively straightforward conversion into flats, minimising extensive works. We acknowledge the potential harm from conversion, particularly concerning the historical aspects of the church, such as the stained glass windows. Our plans include measures to preserve key architectural features, ensuring the building's heritage is respected. It will also enhance the aesthetic appeal of the area, transforming a neglected site into a vibrant residential space. We believe this project represents a balanced approach to development, combining preservation with modernisation. To coin the conclusion from the officer's report prior to the marketing issue, the proposal represents a sustainable reuse of a vacant community building, making a modest contribution to local housing supply whilst retaining the site's historical and architectural character. Whilst it is with a heavy heart that the diocese made the decision to close its doors, we must now look forward to ensuring its continued usefulness and integration into the neighbourhood. Given that the choice to close the church was driven by a declining attendance and the financial burden of its upkeep, confirmed by Father Peter Wilkinson, this proposal represents a pragmatic and positive solution to utilise and preserve the building. The site was purchased at auction by my client, who sat right next to me. The marketing shortfall was raised to me the day before committee by the case officer, and I contacted the auctioneers immediately. They were unable to check their records due to the age of the purchase, but commented that properties are typically marketed for 1 month in order to raise awareness prior to them going to auction. Whilst the traditional marketing exercise may have limitations in this scenario, we believe the overall benefits of this project merits your consideration and approval. We will never meet the year outlined in prescribed local policy, but positively meet every other policy consideration. The building will continue to stand vacant, and this fundamental constraint resonated with the Parishes Committee 2 weeks ago. We respectfully request the committee's approval to proceed with the conversion, confident that it will benefit the community and preserve the church's legacy at a time when the council does not have a 5-year land supply. Planning balance plays a role here, as well as local and national planning policies that prioritise the efficient use of previously developed land, testament to the positive outcome that we had 2 weeks ago. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. If I could have the applicant, Tom Fryer, please.
Thank you. Councillors and those in attendance, thank you for this opportunity to speak. I grew up in Barrowford, in fact, just round the corner from St Peter and Paul's Church. The church and the surrounding area has a close place in my heart. When I purchased the building 4 years ago, I had dreamed of setting up a modern, fully equipped dental practice to service the needs of the community. However, it quickly became apparent there was significant opposition to this idea. Local people had numerous concerns, and in particular, the overdevelopment of the site and parking worries. There seemed to be a large amount of anxiety, especially concerning community aspects such as the development of a lecture theatre space. I felt the idea was non-viable, and I decided to pursue a different path and extend my existing dental practice instead. I've taken some time to raise finance to reapply for this planning application. In the meantime, I've maintained the building, although there are some deteriorations, and I have numerous discussions with residents regarding the best use for the space. I'm grateful for this meeting, an opportunity to discuss the outcome of this important building. I would love for the building to remain a public space, obviously. However, this idea is fraught with issues. Developing and maintaining the building, together with running and staffing costs, would demand a huge amount of public resources. There seems to be no appetite from the Heritage Trust or local authorities in this respect. Could the building be presented as a wedding venue for the community as a private venture? Sounds idyllic until the prospect of alcohol licences, parking for 60 plus guests enters the equation. Ask local residents their thoughts on such a venture, and you should be sure to check they aren't eating their dinner lest they spit it out in surprise. One should also consider the parking spaces that are now taken up to a lease to the malt kiln offices, which detracts quite a few parking spaces. The community building aspect simply lacks practicality. It seems unequivocal to me, and most people, I am clear. The site is beautiful, it pulls on our heartstrings, including mine, obviously, but the space must be developed as a residential building. Pragmatism is required to preserve the site for the good of local residents and the community as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I have speaker number 3 is Ian Lord.
I'm just trying to abridge my speak. I'll try cutting some of it down. The main problem with the site is that it's situated on Gisborne Road and the back is on Pinfold. Any land that is not currently built on is set at least 4 metres between the level of both Pinfold and Gisborne Road. So the chance of creating off-road parking on that site are negligible, because by the time you put the ramps in necessary to go down, you've taken the space up. The second problem is that from just below the bridge at Foreside to right in front of the church doors, there are double white lines in the middle of the road. So there's no on-street parking along any of the curtilage at the front. There was an application back in 2002 for the then dentist surgery and 3 apartments. The parish would have supported this apart from the fact that there's no on-road parking. Pendle once owned a car park opposite, which it leased on a peppercorn and rent to Heritage Trust for the North West, and was free to use and with no rules or regulations. Just prior to the church closing, Pendle signed over that piece of land to Heritage Trust for the North West, who then introduced charges. This caused an instant rise in cars parking on Gisborne Road, predominantly just above the Maltkill entrance. I know that they were approached with regards to parking for the dental scheme. Now, I think at the time 19 parking spaces were required. We'd just about finished one or two of the early lockdowns, and the Heritage Centre, or Pendle Heritage Trust for the North West, had no inclination of how many parking spaces would be used by users of Ireford Mill or other locals, because through the lockdown it was basically deserted, and I believe they offered 4 parking spaces for this development, which was totally inadequate and would have led to more cars parking on Gisborne Road at a particularly hazardous point. The concerns the parish had then must have come forward because the application was withdrawn after 2 fairly rigorous highway reports that outlined the shortfalls of parking, immediate dangers for traffic on that area. And then 3 years later another application comes for 6 apartments. They've managed to acquire 12 parking spaces on the Maltkill car park, which is the equivalent of 2 to each house. The building is deteriorating, and the front of it is predominantly windows with very little stonework. And it's also situated at one of the most important vistas in the Ireford conservation area, overlooking the Packhorse Bridge, Forside, Ireford Mill, and this large imposing church building. And the parish is concerned that if it remains empty for quite any considerable length of time, it'll go the way of a lot of buildings that end up that derelict that they have to be demolished. The chance of turning it back into community use is highly unlikely because it's an exceptionally large building. It must be remembered it started off as a school with a church above it. So it's a considerable building, and for it to be used for community use it will need a considerable amount of parking. Even if it was a wedding venue you would need at least 60 car parking spaces. And the parish has taken the pragmatic approach that to save the building they would rather it see changed into 6 apartments with adequate off-road parking than leave it derelict, and would like Pendle to look on it favourably.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Yeah. Right, okay. Councillor Nadeem Ahmed.
Thank you. Apologies for being late, and I might have missed what Ian Lord has touched upon. But at the area committee there was a quite thorough discussion about this particular building, and I think we all agree we would want it to remain as community use, but because of the difficulties surrounding the site itself, particularly in terms of the lack of parking spaces, to turn it to community use would be extremely difficult in terms of complying with planning policy. And the concern really is, if this application is turned down, it's refused, that building is going to lie empty for years, and then we're going to have the issue of dealing with another derelict building in Barrowford, which we can't afford to have lying empty in such a prominent position. So I think we're looking at it. Like I said, we all wanted to remain as a community, but I think because of the circumstances, we don't want it to remain a derelict and be an eyesore. And then we're going to have the same issue. Then people will be saying to us, look, we've got a derelict building, do something about it, and we're going to be struggling. So we've got an opportunity here now to turn that building back into use, so people can use it for residential use. So the request is really to the committee to please approve the application.
Thank you very much. We'll move to the Councillor, Councillor David Whip, and Councillor Iqbal.
Thank you. I'm not necessarily against the residential use of this property, but I think that we need some further information in terms of the reason for the recommended refusal is the taking it out of community use. So I think we need a bit of a justification for that. If we're going to go against the policy, you know, is it justifiable to do so? And I think the case needs to be built for that. And I'm saying that because up the road from here, we've got the Cross Gates, which isn't that far away. I can't try and think how far away it is. Half a mile. And the reason, or one of the reasons for refusing the Cross Gates for residential was because of the inadequate community space in the area. So we might well be shooting ourselves in the foot if we approve this one tonight. So I think there's some work needs to be done in that, and I'd like to see a report coming back. The other issue, when Councillor Bell and I were leaving the site visit this afternoon, we just happened to bump into somebody on the pavement, and they said, well, what's happening to the stained glass? And he explained that his family had paid for and provided 2 stained glass windows in the church, and he was asking, well, will that stained glass be retained as a feature, or will that stained glass be, you know, sort of displayed or kept, or, you know, indeed given back to the families if the development isn't making use of the existing windows? So I think that's another issue that needs to be explored with the developer and his agent as to the future use of that stained glass. So for those reasons, I would propose that we defer a decision on this without prejudice to what his decision may be in the future for that further information.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Councillor Mohammed Iqbal, please.
I'm a second of what Councillor Lewis.
Is there anyone who wants to second that? Councillor Sarah Corbyn-Price. I'll speak to Councillor Iqbal first, and then
I'll let her speak soon, but she's seconded it.
Councillor Sarah Corbyn-Price.
Okay. I think that Councillor Whip makes some cogent points that I think can be easily solved, and we also have raised in the officer's report here the question of bins. So I don't think that a deferral for 1 month, just to get these tweaks fully ironed out so that everybody knows exactly what is going on, is in any way deleterious to this application, which I know is welcomed by the community. The chairman of Highfield Residents Association wrote to us saying that he supported it. I just think that that is the very sensible thing to do. So that's why I'm seconding it.
Thank you very much. Councillor Mohammed Iqbal.
No, I've got 2 questions. One is to Mr. Fryer or your agent. How has the church been empty, do we know?
It's been empty since 2019. Can I come back on the stained glass window point? Because we've got the clerk sat next to me, and we've already spoken about retaining those stained glass windows.
As long as you're very, very brief and quick.
Just that really.
Yeah,
and also in terms of the marketing, we will never be able to produce that year. So in a way, a deferral, I'll be sat here in a month saying we will never have that marketing for a year because it went to auction. So unless, well, yeah, that's the reason why. I completely agree with what you said. That's exactly why it went. It was discussed thoroughly at committee 2 weeks ago, because the pragmatic view was, well, actually, what's the point? You're not going to be able to produce this marketing, and yes, it's against policy, but planning balance plays a part. Anyway, I'm teaching to suck eggs, but just the context really. Stained glass windows has already been discussed, and the bins can be conditioned as per my conversation with the case officer.
Thank you, Neil.
Yeah, Chairman, there are 3 tests for the under policy SUP one. It's not just about the marketing. An appropriate alternative is provided. Well, clearly that isn't the case. It doesn't have to be that. It hasn't been marketed, won't be. I accept that. I think it's just been more robust with some of the evidence about the viability, etc. Because a lot of churches, for example, their congregation are reducing, but they still carry on. So we just need a bit more. Because I am very conscious that if we don't have that robust evidence, and I think it can be done, I've with Councillor Coburn-Price, I think it can be done, your cross gates of this world just falls well. And I know the community will be up in arms if that went. So it's trying to safeguard the future by just getting the right balance of evidence. I'm pretty confident we can do it, but I don't think we're quite there with that yet. Okay.
Can I ask you a question, Neil?
Councillor Modigball?
Sorry, I think Ian was going to say something.
Ian?
Could I ask you a question, Neil?
If you, yeah.
Well, is parking a material matter? Would that? The biggest problem with that building is that if you've turned it into a community use, because of the size of it, you would never get the parking needed. Because there's no, it has no land.
Thank you.
It doesn't, anyway, as a church or anything, it doesn't have parking, so that is a constant issue for any kind of development.
Well, not all on the main trunk road.
So, no issue with the development per se. 6, I think, will be a reasonable and a good alternative use, provided that evidence is strong enough.
Thank you. Councillor Modigball?
Yeah, thanks for that information, Neil, and also the three gentlemen that have spoken. I mean, my view is that if the church has been empty since 2019, how much longer do we leave it empty before the residents of Barrowford Delta, for example, like Dave Dalian and others, breathing down there? Because we've all experienced that in one shape or form in terms of our own particular one. I mean, I'm not against the application. I'm just thinking whether, rather than deferring it, whether colleagues would think delegating grant consent, if generally the view is that we support it, delegating grant consent to Neil to address those points, and then if the points are addressed satisfactorily, then you can do it in consultation with the three ward councillors like that concern, or the chairman of this committee, tell you up to you, Chair. And those questions that are asked by councillors with the Coburn-Price are addressed. Then rather than waiting a month to then approve it, at least the applicant can get cracking with the application. I mean, in principle, I don't have an issue, but I think there are some questions, but I think rather than deferring it, my view is that we delegate grant consent to Neil in consultation with the three ward councillors.
Cool, thank you. Anyone happy to second that one? Councillor 9. Councillor David Whip.
Well, can I speak against that? Because I too am not necessarily against the application, but I do think we need to ask them to go through the processes as outlined by Neil. I'm satisfied that the stained glass has got a home, or there's a solution for the stained glass, but I am highly conscious of the Cross Gates appeal, which if we approve or delegate approval for this, will blow that appeal, well, not blow the appeal out of the water, it will blow our defence out of the water. And I think it's very important that we do not prejudice the consideration of that appeal at the Cross Gates.
I mean, David makes a valid point, but Neil, at every meeting that I attend with him, always says that each planning application is judged on its own merit, and you can't bring others into it. I mean, I take on board what Council will be saying, but it's entirely up to the other colleagues. I mean, if they want to support referral, they can support referral.
Chair, it's not arguing the merit of one case against each other. It's not undermining our case in the other case.
Hearing him for a second time, Chairman, I'm happy to withdraw my motion and bow to Councillor Whip's wisdom.
Thank you. So we're happy to go back to David Whip's deferral.
Chairman, just
Councillor Zafar Ali.
Yeah, just really to help the applicant, because I know that Neil's been very helpful with some of the remarks which have been directed at the applicant to come back with a further robust case in terms of the evidence. But on page 30, there's a reference made to a statement from the church's former priest. Neil, through you, Chair, are we saying that the evidence from the priest is not robust enough?
Yes.
Okay. Really more directed for...
Yeah, I don't know what you expect us to produce, to be honest.
Right.
So.
Neil, help you out.
If it goes away, I'll discuss it directly with them tomorrow. I think it's just presenting it in some more detail. As I said, the financial situation has to be looked at as well, and a lot of churches are still going with smaller congregations, and we haven't got a lot more detail that we probably need on that. And it is about being fair to we are in an appeal. We've got an appeal statement to write within half a mile. And if we approve something without that robust evidence, quite rightly we should lose that other appeal. We have to be consistent.
Yeah. Chair, it's what I call finding some wriggle room so that we're not driving a coach and horses through the policy. And given the tension with other issues directly related to this area of policy in that immediate area, I think that's something that we need to find.
Okay, that's fine. So we can go back to the deferral, what David Whip stated, and Councillor Sarah Cobbin-Price who wants to second that. Are we all happy for the deferral? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. So it's been deferred. Thank you so much.
Where are we going next?
No idea.
This is a bit of a lot, isn't it?
Back to application number 25011 OUT. It's an erection of 9 detached and semi-detached dwellings with integral and attached and detached garages, access layout, scale and landscaping at 425 Gisborne Road, Blackhall. We've got 4 speakers on this one. The first speakers, if we could have Maureen Ivers. Is Maureen Ivers here?
Yeah, I'll stand up.
Sure, Maureen.
Low down there.
That's fine, that's fine.
There is a seat at the end of the table there. Anybody want?
If you feel comfortable sitting next to Councillor Aslam, that's fine.
I was just very low in that
All right.
seat at the back.
You're even lower there.
Well, it'll be fine. It'll be fine, yeah. Right.
Thank you.
Okay? Yeah.
Please.
An original application for 9 houses on that site was allowed at appeal under the terms of it being a small development, and that allowing it would not set precedent for future development in Blackhall. This application is now termed major and is worded as a second phase. Doubling the number of houses on the site would be intrusive to a small village and would adversely affect the rural characteristics and visual amenity of this area of Pendle. The application specifies 9 detached and semi-detached dwellings. On the amended site map, I see only detached properties. It's factually incorrect and it's misleading. There is no mention of affordable homes, and I believe that this should apply to the whole 18. The proposed development cannot be seen as affordable. Gisborne Road is categorised as a strategic route carrying a high volume of traffic. We suffer from this already throughout the village, and the proposed application would only exacerbate the problems. There will be an increased negative impact on the safety of the road network and for people using the pavements. The proposed new road layout going to the site gives no thought to the present users of the existing track to the water meetings. Several issues should be considered. The inevitable crossover of traffic at the top, the need for large farm vehicles to use the whole carriageway at that point, and the loss of an appropriate line of sight into the existing track. The amended plans still do not address these issues, and the increased traffic will exacerbate the problems, as will the proposed planting. A build of this size will remove a substantial area of permeable land, having an adverse impact on the natural runoff of water, thus increasing the flood risk down the valley to the water meetings and the river. The present track is often in a bad state, severely affected after heavy rain, showing runoff from Gisborne Road right down. In Pendle Local Plan Part 2, Blackhall is described as having a very limited range of services and facilities. The bus service certainly cannot be seen as being regular, as stated in the application. The school planning team's initial response refers to the shortfall of school places locally. New homes in the village would therefore need to rely upon private vehicles for daily life, be that work, education, health or shopping. The proposed development extends further into open countryside, and it's described as being within the area of garden for 425 Gisborne Road, whereas for many years it's been used specifically for grazing horses, and it's well beyond the settlement boundary line. Blackhall is listed as a rural village, and policy states rural villages will accommodate development primarily to meet local needs. The application makes no reference to any local need. Policy also states that declined settlements in rural Pendle will see limited growth, whilst development in the open countryside will be restricted. The application does not meet criteria within local Pendle plan or government policies which uphold the need to maintain and protect an area's prevailing character and setting. They also state that planning policies and decisions should take local circumstances into account to reflect the character, needs and opportunities of each area. I urge the committee to refuse the application due to the obvious detrimental effect a development of this size would have on all aspects of life for current villagers, and the fact that it does not address any specific needs for our local community. Nor does it fit with many aspects of Pendle local plan, Pendle Council's vision for the future, or government plans. Any minimal benefits certainly do not outweigh the disadvantages. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you very much, Maureen. The next speaker is Liam Soul.
Yeah.
Thank you, Liam.
I also would like to strongly object as well. I've taken, reading the plans, it mentions that about a soakaway to deal with surface water. This won't work because the water comes over and down the lane already, which is currently being eroded due to recent flooding. The gravel from the road, if anybody's been to actually look at it, is in the field at the bottom. It looks like the farmer's put a hard standing road in. He hasn't. The gravel came down through the woods, down the track and washed onto the road. It washes the road away constantly. Lancashire Schools down as no contribution at this stage. The school's already oversubscribed. Some siblings not actually getting in, don't know where they're going to go for the people that are coming in and moving into the area, and these houses are going to be bought by people that are wanting to give a better start for their children. Our mains water comes down the proposed site plans as well. It says that it's going to be built over, and our mains water comes right through the middle of that land. My son has lost 5 days at school due to flooding already. Houses on Gisborne Road being flooded and the lane being damaged. The water continues to run off the development site and erode the lane and everything that it passes on the way down. Farm access is needed in and out from both sides. The farmer owns land on both sides of the area. It doesn't take into account any cars parked on Gisborne Road and the amount of HGVs that come through there currently. The farmer works with us around access. It's not going to be possible for this to be done with the increasing number of houses on there. We have already had electricity and water disruption with the other developments on the other side of the track, which is currently being built. This interrupts working from home and family life with no electricity and water currently, so we've also got concerns around the new development, what this is going to bring. The internet won't cope. It can't currently send an email and watch something on iPlayer. The signal's weak, so putting more houses in isn't going to be able to deal with it. And originally we weren't even notified that development was going to even take place when right back at the start, but yet we're directly affected by this, which I feel is a really underhanded thing to do. So I'd like to strongly object.
Thank you, Liam. If I can have Rebecca Cohen, please. Hi, Rebecca.
Hi there, hello. Good evening everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to come and speak. I'm happy to say that I live next door to Liam and Amanda and Maureen down at water meetings. I spoke at the meeting the other week, very much objecting to this application. I have submitted an objection in writing as part of the application process as well, and have done to previous applications for this site. It's fair to say that I absolutely understand the reason why anyone would want to come and live in Blacko and come and live down here in this part of Blacko village where we presently live at water meetings. It's a beautiful part of the world, and I know we might be accused of NIMBYism. However, when my family and I moved to this area 5 years ago, I think I understood that it wasn't just about creating a family home. I was also a custodian of a place that's really special to hundreds and thousands of local people that come and walk the route around the Pendle Way and down to water meetings. And I would be neglecting that duty of care if I didn't stand here tonight and object in the strongest possible language I can without being rude about this application. And there's several reasons why I feel so strongly. First is, I really feel that the planning process is being held hostage by the applicant. We've had 4 separate applications. It's not just one application for what is in effect a housing development, let's be honest. First it was one house, then it was another house, and it was 9 houses. This one was 11, now it's reduced back down to 9. As soon as the planning kind of hit the problem of flooding, they reduced it down so that it was below the mandatory level at which flooding would have to be a statutory consultancy. That feels so manipulative. I look at this agenda and I see democracy in action stamped at the top. This applicant is trying to undermine that democratic process. And the comments in here about the risk, the financial risk of the council and an appeal. And I know that the previous application went down to the inspectorate and the appeal was upheld. And we're now faced with that application having been approved previously. But we've got to try and object. We've got to try and stop this madness. This site is simply not appropriate for this number of houses. Liam's already said, the lane floods. We're totally reliant on that lane. It's the only way of getting in and out of our houses. Every time it rains, not even heavy rain, the surface washes away. At the bottom of the site, it's permanently damp. If you'd gone down there, you probably didn't go to the bottom of the site today. But it's wet. You put your wellies on today, and how dry has it been for months? It doesn't cope with the slightest bit of rain. We've got some cracking videos we'd love to show you of the water, not just trickling, cascading in torrents down the field and down the lane. We've seen firsthand on the other side of where Maureen lives, where there's one house being constructed. They stripped away the grass, they stripped away the hedgerow, they stripped away trees. The runoff has been appalling. As Liam's already said, they cut through our incoming power supply. So the fact that on this development they're looking at building over our incoming water supply fills me with absolute dread. There are statements in the application that are simply not true, that they seem to allude to, oh, isn't it great that they'll be able to link into great public transport. There's one bus every 1 hour, 15 minutes going to Nelson. That is not great public transport. Cycling. There's no cycle infrastructure up there. There are no cycle lanes. There's parking space for 44 cars. How on earth are you going to safely get 44 cars out of that lane? I'm sorry I'm getting irate, and I don't mean to be rude. But it just beggars belief that we're even sat here considering it. And I would just urge anyone with an ounce of common sense to please reject this application. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. And speaker number 4 is Amanda Hollins.
Hi. I was going to sit if that's all right.
Yeah, sure, Amanda, please do.
Yeah, I am also strongly objecting, and I'll just read out a few points that I've made. Blacko is already severely congested at peak times. Existing residents park both sides of the road, and the village is used as a thoroughfare for HGVs, meaning it is effectively a single-track road a lot of the time, as the road isn't wide enough to accommodate HGVs travelling in one direction and cars travelling in an oncoming direction. As a result, the traffic queues along the main road at the entrance to our lane to the proposed development. And if cars are then queuing to get on and off the new estate, the village would end up gridlocked in both directions. I've seen it before with only a few residents down that lane. We've already got these 9 houses approved. We're now in a situation where they're applying for another 9 properties. There are 2 farmers down that road, my husband being one of them, and there's another farmer as well that has land down that road. We actually have to communicate with one another to make sure that we are not in and out with livestock in trailers on the back of our tractors at the same time. Now if you see, there's now going to be an S-bend proposed. We won't have any line of sight to see whether the vehicle coming up might be coming up with a trailer load of livestock and a vehicle trying to get in. We're not going to, neither of us can reverse in that situation. It will just be total gridlock. Add on to that the 18 plus cars that are going to be wanting to come in and out of the estate in both directions. It's a complete non-starter. Facilities and reasons. The small village of Blacko doesn't need and cannot cope with the proposed number of new residents that this development will bring. There's no shops in the village. The small village school, as we've already said, full to capacity. The bus route has already been mentioned. So the new residents that will come in will have to use their cars to access services, employment and schools in other towns, adding to increased traffic congestion and emissions around the area. The mains water pipe, which supplies our 3 properties down at Water Meetings, runs right through the field which is being proposed to be built upon. We've already endured that period of time without power due to one development being cutting through our cables. Is it going to happen for our mains water pipe? If the pipe is somehow diverted, it would presumably still have to be concreted over with houses and driveways. So what if there's a future issue with the integrity of the pipe and a leak occurs or the pipe needs replacing? In increasing instances of prolonged rainfall, the limestone lane next to the development already floods dramatically, and the loose stone of the track and even chunks of the tarmac road further down wash away into the river and the watercourses due to the sheer volume of water which flows down Gisborne Road from the village. The drains and the infrastructure already cannot cope. The land and woodland below the proposed development is already at risk due to erosion from the water when it floods down the hill. You can see the exposed tree roots down the really popular, well-used footpath through the wooded area. If the extra houses are added, it would mean a loss of green space, which currently acts as a natural soakaway, plus an increase in surface water runoff from the new houses and driveways. Not to mention the added water from new residents into the existing drains, which are already unfit for purpose. The ponds, rivers and watercourses will be contaminated by dirty muddy water from the unnecessarily large building site when work is being done. This has already been witnessed when the development up the hillside was under construction, and that was just the one house. Dippers and kingfishers which currently hunt in the river will not be able to find fish due to the muddy waters. Okay. Having lived down the lane next to this proposed development for over 5 years and driving past at least twice daily, I have first-hand knowledge of the natural habitats, the field, which is grazing land used historically for horses and not a garden, supports through all the 4 seasons. There are regular deer grazing the field, and their natural habitat has already been dramatically reduced since construction has begun on the development of the hillside. Barn owls can be seen if you drive down the road at night. Just that 2-minute act of noise and light with me driving down disturbs them. So imagine if the extra 9 houses are approved, the noise and the light pollution, unfortunately, will be permanent and the owls will be forced to leave the area. In the warmer months, bats can be seen swooping around, feeding at dusk. If the development goes ahead, the scale of it would mean several months, if not years, of noise and vibration, not to mention light pollution, in an otherwise dark environment which is away from the street lighting. This will adversely affect their ability to feed and lead to a decline in an already endangered species. This development is unnecessary. It doesn't offer affordable housing for the community. In fact, it takes a great deal away from the community in terms of the natural, unspoilt green spaces that local residents enjoy and the priceless habitats which will be destroyed, which are vital for a large variety of species and wildlife. As we know, new developments are now legally required to have a biodiversity net gain. With all the aforementioned for this proposed site, that is impossible as the negatives far outweigh any potential benefits.
Amanda, if you could start wrapping up, please.
Yeah, okay. The first phase of this development was outside the settlement boundary. The second phase is now well outside the boundary. Where is the line drawn to say that development is outside the settlement boundary and cannot proceed? It contravenes policy ENV2. The siting and design is not in scale and harmony with its surroundings. The development will totally change the rural nature of the lane down to the historic water meetings. It contravenes policy ENV4 in terms of safety on a very busy A road. A report was submitted to Barrowford and Western Parishes Committee only last month by PCSO Fielding, which states that Miles Fox wagons continue to be a concern travelling through Blackwell and Hereford. And even Blackwell Parish Council, I know, have written to LCC Highways explaining concerns about the safety issues concerning traffic and asked them to reconsider their position regarding this development. The scale of this development is totally inappropriate for a small village like Blackwell.
Thank you, Amanda. Thank you so much. I'd like to bring it forward to Councillor David Wood.
Oh, thank you, Chairman. Well, again, we had a site visit this afternoon, but earlier in the year when the application that we got before us tonight was submitted, I went to have a look at the site, and I mean, it was sort of like not early morning, but you know, sort of 8, 9 o'clock-ish, something like that, and I was very surprised at the number of people who were walking down to the water meetings, or indeed panting coming back up. And there is a significant number of people who are using that track on foot. and I also took my car just to see, you know, what it was like coming out of the junction, and I accept that the current junction is different to the one that's proposed, and I didn't find that a particularly comfortable because of the amount of traffic that there is on the road there, on the main road. So I do think there are issues of highway safety that are very relevant to the application. Now, this is all complicated by the fact that an inspector has approved some dwellings in that area already, and this is an increase in the number of dwellings that would be using the layout that has already been approved. But I think the increase in the number of vehicles using that, together with the inadequate way in which the vehicles using the lane down to water meetings are incorporated into that junction, I don't think it's adequate, and I think there's a justifiable reason to refuse it on highway ground. So I think it's the conflict at the junction that is giving that cause for concern, and I don't think that's necessarily something that the Highway Authority has really picked up on and appreciated, and that in combination with the number of pedestrians who are using the route, because, you know, if it's a farm track, you know, the people, you know, the officials that look at this might think, well, it's just a farm track, and, you know, there's not a great deal of foot traffic on it, but that is not the case in this place. Once we've been listening to the speakers, Councillor Bell has been assiduously going through all the documentation, and I've been looking over his folder at his screen, and it drew my attention to the proposals, the soft landscaping, tree planting proposals that there are. So when you look at it, you know, it is surrounded by trees on the boundaries, and you think, well, it's, you know, it's sort of like hidden away. But what the planting scheme shows is new hedging to go in, which presupposes that the quite large trees that are there in a large part of the development will be removed. So, you know, the very trees that are screening the development from the open countryside, I can only assume are going to be removed as part of the development. And I think that leads me on to a second ground as to why we should refuse this, and that is the impact on the landscape. I appreciate that we couldn't substantiate those grounds for refusal on the previous application, but this is, I won't say it's a horrible urban intrusion into the countryside. I'll take out the word horrible. It's an awful urban extension into the countryside. And if you look at the suggested conditions which the highway people would want, you know, they're talking about, well, you've got to have street lights and you've got to have all the accoutrements of that urban environment. And this is something that's like sticking into a beautiful part of not only the Blackwall countryside but the Pendle countryside. I mean, Water Meetings is one of those quintessential places that people deliberately go to visit, and you have this urban extrusion, call it an extrusion, you know, sort of poking out into that pristine countryside. So I think that the impact on the landscape is far greater with the extension of this development beyond the currently approved on appeal set of houses that we've already got. So I think we ought to be rejecting this application on those grounds. I understand and appreciate the concern about drainage, but I've sat on this committee or its predecessor committee for a long number of years, and we once turned the development down. It's the Meadows in Colne. We turned it down partly on drainage grounds. We actually won the appeal on other reasons, but we ended up losing that part of the appeal on the drainage grounds because the inspector just turned around and said, well, you could have conditioned the requirements for sustainable urban drainage scheme. And we have had other examples where we've turned things down on drainage, including one quite recently on flood risk. The appeal inspectors have approved them, and to a large extent we've had costs awarded against us because we've been unreasonable. So I fully understand and appreciate the concerns from residents about there are issues with drainage, but I just don't think we can sustain that in fighting an appeal. And I think if we included drainage grounds, whether or not we won the appeal, we'd get hammered on that particular aspect. So I'm not proposing to include drainage in the grounds for refusal. And if you look at the conditions, it does require drainage schemes, both for surface water, foul sewage, etc., etc., etc. And any inspector will just turn around and say, well, that was your remedy, put appropriate conditions on. So I don't think we should include that. I think, Mr. Chairman, that's me. I would move that we refuse this, both on highway safety grounds and on the impact on the landscape.
Okay. Anyone happy to second that before I move on to the next? Councillor Ashton-Cliff, that's fine. We'll happy to refuse that.
Well, if I'm next to speak,
if you are. So Councillor Ashton.
Thank you, Chairman. This is almost like a tick list of my pet hates. It's Sarah's cringing already because it really does. It really does irk me. The lady, was it Rebecca, that said you'll accuse us or think about that we're NIMBYs. Good, absolutely good. Why not? Why can't you be an NIMBY? You live there. You've got to live with these things when they develop. Why not be an NIMBY? You don't want these things in your backyard, and I completely understand why. Fine, you've made your point, but you also went on and explained the point. It wasn't a case of we just don't like it. You said there's actual valid reasons to why this cannot be built there. There's valid reasons to why it shouldn't be done, and I completely agree with pretty much everything that you said, actually. Now, one of the things that really struck me was something you said about bus routes and cycling. I live in Colne, and we always have planning applications that say, oh, everybody will ride around like it's Amsterdam, they'll have bags for baskets, they'll cycle up Windybank and Exchange Street, two of the steepest streets in the UK, not just in Colne, but in the UK. And it's sort of like County Council talk about sustainable travel, like everybody does that. Where do we live? Midsummer? It's just not like that. We've got to get real, and we've got to think about where we live, where we can access these things, and I don't think that it is viable to say that this is accessible via public transport, because there's a bus per hour, and you can cycle up that big hill. I've run that hill at Blackwell from Highford and Barrowford. I'm a keen runner and walker, so I do that. Now, the place is called Water Meetings. It's not called Water Meetings for nothing. I know that because I've walked it and I've run it, and I understand. And I also understand water runoff. Now, the impact of that is severe. It is severe. I don't think there's any other phrase for it. Unfortunately, and I completely echo the sentiments that Councillor Whip shared about being able to use that as an argument against this this application because it will just be conditioned away. But it's another one of those things that really irritates me because the reality when we all live with these developments is that they are not sustainable. They call it sustainable urban drainage. It's not sustainable 9 times out of 10. We know that the drainage just doesn't really work. Now, in terms of things that irk me, I looked at the plans on this, and there's all over the actual layout of the plan. It says turfed area, turfed area, turfed area. Now, you show me a housing development in Pendle that has gone up in the last 10 years, where you go on and you go into any of those gardens and you walk out there and it is actually a garden. It's full of grass and trees and plants. They're not. They use porcelain tiles, they use plastic grass, and they are an absolutely barren part of wasteland. They are not gardens. They do not drain away water. They don't sustainably drain away water or absorb it. It runs off and it goes where it shouldn't. So it's just not, turfed area is just an absolute nonsense.
We can't condition it.
And we can't condition it. We've been through this, time and time again of how much that irritates me. This is a cookie-cutter design layout. It's the same thing time and time again in films. It's just the same house repeated. It's like going to a buffet and a load of mirrors. It's just that same thing. Sausage roll, sausage roll, sausage roll. You don't want to see houses like that. This is a lovely, people live in Blackpool, as you said, because it's a nice place to live. It was built in the way that it was nice because everything grew organically. They built little houses and little farms where things were needed. Not because they wanted to, because they wanted to make money, because that was the need for the people that lived there. And that's exactly what I want to see in these developments. So the last thing on my list was speed. Speed and the main road. My partner's a delivery driver and drives a moderate-sized van. And whenever we drive through Blackpool, he says, I hate coming through here. It's a nightmare. Because you have to stop. Every single point you have to stop because people are either giving way or they're driving like lunatics. It's one or the other. There's no in between. Residents, except you're probably decent people who drive sensibly and give way and moderate speed. But I would say overall there is a severe concern about speed through there. Now there is a very serious mitigation by National Highways that was put in because of that concern around speed. They put average speed cameras in all the way through because there was a serious concern about speed. So to argue otherwise is a nonsense. There is a serious concern and they're trying to do something about it. So I fully support Councillor Whitt's motion around the acts. I think the speed is coupled around with the safety. But it wasn't until you talked about the farm vehicles entering and exiting from that S-bend and how severe that curve is to get a tractor and a trailer around there, you're never going to do it. You're never going to do that safely. And I think that's the number one thing. Is safety will come first of all, and I'm really pleased that Councillor Whitt moved that.
Thank you. Councillor Mohammed?
Thank you. First of all, I just want to take the opportunity of thanking the residents for being here again this evening. They spoke really well at the area committee and they've raised the arguments again. And I think it helps us councillors understand what the real issues are and gets us thinking. And thank you to the committee because that's what it's all about here. The discussion that's taken place this evening is really thorough discussion on the real issues which are affecting our residents. And just touching on the point regarding highways, in the report there's no mention of the incidents that have taken place, and residents will be aware of a number of incidents on the main road which have happened, some serious accidents have taken place, and there's no mention of that within the report. And I know highways usually come back and say, well, we've got no safety concerns, but we all know, people who know the area understand it, that there are some serious road safety issues which have been highlighted this evening. I totally agree on the second point in terms of drainage. At the area committee we put 3 reasons forward, so I'm happy to accept the reasons behind not putting in drainage because it can be conditioned, and we understand the implications that may have when it goes if it goes to appeal. And the third reason, the second reason that's been put forward is in terms of visual impact, which again was discussed at the area committee meeting and been discussed here again this evening. So totally accept that, and I'm hoping the committee will refuse this application.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Chair. After visiting the site this afternoon, and I saw the layout with Neil there, and he said, you've got the fir trees down that line, you've got that boundary, and I thought, yeah, that looked really nice, like Councillor Whip said, reading in depth, that all them trees are going. That is on that plan. And then, I know we're not supposed to look at the conditions set from the previous iteration, but seeing as at the moment nothing's been built from the first planning, if you don't mind me, Chair, I'm just going to quote here from, this was from the examiner for the appeal decision, decision date on the 25th of April 2024. We've already touched on the drainage, that was mentioned here, that it needs to be updated. But this one here, Section 15, a preliminary ecological appraisal report and a preliminary roost assessment for bats have been provided, subject to conditions. The development would have an acceptable impact on wildlife and existing habitats. But when I come down to number 21, conditions related to drainage are necessary to promote sustainable development, secure proper drainage and to manage the risk of flooding and pollution. To ensure the ecology of the site is enhanced and protected species are not harmed by the development. Conditions related to the preliminary ecological appraisal report and preliminary roost assessments are necessary. Given the date of these reports, it is necessary to ensure that the surveys are fit for purpose and updated if the development has not been taken place by May 2024. Now, looking at that plan that's going in where you're taking the trees out, to me would say that would have an impact on any of the ecological of bats that may be roosting in that area. So for me, there is an ecological issue. And that is what I'm reading from the examiner's report for the appeal. And for this one that's looking at going forward, like I say, no building has gone forward yet. And what I've read, they are 3-bedroom houses. So if there is an impact there with 3-bedroom houses, taking all these trees down and putting up a hedge, I think it would have a major impact. And I will actually like to say move that go ahead that we actually refuse this application. So I think it's going to have a big impact.
I can see Mr Watson's looking very sad, and that's because obviously when things come to appeal, council has to take the previous judgment very seriously, because inspectors like to agree with inspectors, they don't like to disagree with them. But I do feel this is a different kettle of fish, and I completely agree with Councillor Webb in terms of it being a protuberance into a really beautiful area. Almost 20 years ago, we looked to buy Water Meeting's house, and the only reason we didn't buy it was because Bob the Builder lived in the cottage at the end. Not that we're against Bob the Builder.
My house.
It's your house. My elderly mother lives next door to us, and so we needed a house that had like a granny house, and we couldn't buy Bob the Builder's house, and that's why we didn't buy that house. So I do know the area very well. I know how wild and beautiful it is. I haven't taken into account, and it's not here, about all the people on foot. Yes, they are. They are. So I do totally agree that this protuberance of 18 suburban houses would be a terrible imposition, not just on Blackover Village, but also very specifically on this site. And actually, that road is a bit fast, isn't it? I am not an expert, but as it stands currently, you'd really have to watch yourself, edging, being certain, and what may be all right at a stretch for a really small development, I don't feel the same about a larger development. This, to me, is a different kettle of fish. I do hope that we can make a defence that will allow the inspector not to feel that he's disagreeing with his predecessor, but that this is different. And I just wanted to say something about the system. So, it's very sad for us councillors because we come to these meetings and members of the public stand up and they say, oh, the school is full and I can't get a proper internet signal and all of that. And all of that's true. And you mustn't think that because we never mention it, it's because we don't care about it. Actually, the planning system doesn't allow us to take that into account. It's very, very frustrating. All the sort of logical arguments about dentists or schools or anything like that, it doesn't come into it. We're bound by this thing called the National Planning Policy Framework, and it was quite bad before, and I can tell you it's quite a lot worse now. And it just causes us to come to these meetings with a sense of misery, largely, honestly, because we have to follow the National Planning Policy Framework. If we didn't do that, we'd be failing in our duty. But that also means following the National Planning Policy Framework. Sometimes we're letting down our residents at the same time. So it's a horrible, you're between a rock and a hard place. But I am really hopeful that this is, you know, the applicant has done everything correctly within the system. Yes? And the system is set up to almost encourage, it is, I'm afraid, it is, we see it a lot, is the system is set up to sort of encourage this cumulative impact. So it's not, these people know how the system works and they are doing the system as the system encourages, really. But I feel the frustration that we all feel in this room, and I feel the frustration that you feel, because the system encourages it. That is the system. But otherwise, I would agree with my colleagues.
Thank you very much. So, Councillor, do you want to say something?
If I can just respond to some of the points, Chair. In terms of, I'd written down school and I've forgotten to mention it because I do think that there is a very real issue with school places in Blackpool, and the official line is that if there's inadequate school places, we can put a condition on requiring a developer to pay some money to the Education Authority for the Education Authority to provide school places. The conundrum at Blackpool, and a bit of a catch-22, is that the existing school isn't capable of being expanded in any sensible. It's, you know, shoehorned into that very tiny space. There's not a lot of playground outside. So how could you make it bigger to accommodate a greater number of pupils? I don't think that they reasonably could. So even if the Education Authority were coming along saying, you know, put some money into the education system, I'm not sure how that would be achieved in Blackpool. The system, which has been referred to, if we were considering this application in just a few short months' time, we would be able to reject it because it's outside the settlement boundary. I think, I'm not saying that this developer, but certainly developers are seizing a window of opportunity for them, because we need to get our new local plan into place that then gives us the protection, and it's due to the housing numbers and 5-year supplies and things like that. But essentially, when the new local plan goes through its final bit of the process and is in place, we will be able to defend settlement boundaries. I might be simplifying it too much for Neil, but essentially that is what will happen. So, you know, I think it's a crying shame that this has come at this time, but it may be that the developer has deliberately brought it at this time, together with lots of other applications that there are or are in the offing. And then the final comment, and it's about the system as well, is that through the planning bill that's in Parliament, the opportunity for residents to comment as they have tonight, the opportunity for representatives to comment as they have tonight, will be taken away from us in the future, because there will be a national scheme of delegation that will preclude committees considering this sort of application at all, and only for very large applications, which, you know, we don't have that many of in Pendle, will there be an ability for those applications to go to the relevant planning committee. So the system, to my mind, is getting worse. The playing field is tilted very much in favour of the developers. That is not improving, and sadly in this case the fact that it's like 2 or 3 months before we get the local plan in place means that we've got another line of defence that we cannot put into the equation. I mean, I think that's very sad, but hopefully we can make enough of a case on the grounds that are put forward for refusal for us to justify this on appeal, and I'm desperately hoping that Mr Watson isn't going to pour cold water over those aspirations.
Do you say anything?
I'd like to say a lot,
Yeah,
Chairman,
sure.
to be honest with you, with this debate,
sure.
And about the planning system generally, but it's not my place to do that here. Chairman, there are some serious points here. Councillors have made, and Councillor Sutcliffe made the point about people being able to be NIMBYs. Fine, that's everyone's right, but we can't be. We have to make planning decisions based on evidence. We have to make planning decisions based on robust evidence. And in cases like this, the British planning system, or English planning system certainly, I'm not familiar with the Scottish one, but the English and Welsh is based on precedent. So you have precedents to look at. You can't ignore them. Precedent both in terms of what a planning inspector has done and looked at, and planning, and precedent in terms of what we as a council have done. So, and on top of that, I think people think the MPPS an anathema to planning, but it does present the tilted balance, where you haven't got a 5-year supply of land. We haven't now. We will have, hopefully, when the local plan's adopted. Touch wood, it's adopted. But now the balance is we have to demonstrate significant and demonstrably harmful, and we have to show harm. Okay, so that's the framework that we have to work with, and that's a national framework. Also, in terms of what is in front of you, this is an indicative layout that's up on the screen. You're only being asked to look at access. No trees. The tree report actually shows something different than the layout, but the layout is not up for determination here. It's outlined the 5 characteristics of outlines, 5 reserved matters, 4 are being reserved. It's only access you're being looked at. So let's get down to a couple of the points within this. This axis hasn't changed from the last one. I just looked at the plans. So, residents use that access lane before. The issues about vehicles turning into it, the two vehicles not being able to access themselves and go past each other were there last time. This council, talking about precedent, didn't object to that application last time on access grounds. It was refused on one ground. So, first question in appeal, what's changed? What has changed for this council to change its mind? Bearing in mind also, a planning inspector has said it's perfectly acceptable, this access. So that's the first question we'll be asked at appeal. So, Chairman, I'll come. Questions obviously on that. Obviously there are 9 other houses. It was 11, gone down to 9. I know some people are saying it was cynically changed, but it is what it is. It's changed for that. It was changed for drainage. We're still asking for a drainage strategy anyway, so it really hasn't changed the goalposts. It just means that the lead local flood hasn't commented. Is 9 houses material in traffic flow terms? That's what we will be asked to look at. Is it material? I'll be very candid. It isn't material in terms of the main road. It's minor in terms of numbers. So it's the impact on that access arrangement. How many vehicle movements extra will that? People come up with all kinds of different scenarios, but it's wide enough to get 2 vehicles. There's full visibility out there. It may be 10 extra vehicles in peak hours. in terms of overall traffic flows, no inspector I can imagine will say that that is materially different. So, has the characteristics of the road changed in the last 3 years since the appeal? What has changed on the road to make it now suddenly dangerous in 9 extra houses? I'll leave that to you to ponder. My very clear advice to you today, committee, is that you will not win an appeal on highway grounds, and you are highly probably going to get costs awarded against you, because you have to produce evidence. You have to go to the inspector at the time, the tilted balance, it's to be significant and demonstrable. So it's not getting a set of consultants later on down the line. This committee has to say, or this council, not this committee, this local planning authority, what can you demonstrate, bearing in mind the precedents that you've already looked at, no objection last time, planning inspector, no objection, local highways, no objection, technically okay, what has changed? So if you can't do that, don't refuse it on highway grounds. Okay, landscape grounds is more subjective. And you can, for example, Councillor Wick referred to the meadows. That was one on impact on a house being turned round into the open countryside and the relation to that. So you do have houses down the lane, potentially, although the layout hasn't been submitted yet, so there's a potential for costs awarded against that. Precedent as well. This council refused the last application, which is higher up, more prominent in many ways, although you will have to articulate the impact on the lower section. Refused the application last time based on landscape impact. And the inspector said, no, sorry, I don't agree with you. Do not agree with your assessment. Your assessment is wrong. So, what is it now that allows us to go forward with a case which is significant and demonstrable in the wording of the MPPF to say that there is an extra landscape impact? Bearing in mind, it's quite self-contained at the bottom. So the landscape impact in terms of visual impacts from long-distance vantage points and from the village. From the village itself, you walk down the path, you'll see existing houses and new houses being built there. So what is the landscape impact? And landscape isn't visual impact, it's landscape character. So it's a bottom side of that site we will have to fight an appeal on. So have we got evidence to say it's significant and demonstrable for that bottom section of that field? Because we're not talking about the top section that an inspector's already said to us, local authority, you are wrong in your assessment. You're wrong. I think that's okay. So does this lower part of the development take it beyond that level of harm that we say actually, cumulatively, it's so much worse? I think it is, when we go to site, you'll have the development there, and then it is in the lower end of the site. So from Watermeeting's house, you won't see the bottom side of the site, and from the footpaths across the tops, you won't see it because it's behind the trees and they are evergreens. And there's one tree, by the way, that was looked at in the arborist report to come out in there. That's one tree in the arborist report on that lower section. There's minor trees around the side of it. So, Chairman, you are sovereign, you make your decisions, but my advice to you is for you to take on board. I don't think you've got strong grounds on landscape terms because it is lower. The impact is at the upper section, certainly from long-term vantage point. So you probably will be relying on impacts on the footpath. And you haven't got a layout yet or a landscape scheme. So you have to say in the reasons, and you'll have to set the reasons out very clearly, articulate those. What is it at the time of making this decision makes that unacceptable? If you can explain that, fine, because I hear where the debate's going, obviously, because we've got mover and seconder and a lot of support for that. But that's what will happen in the appeal statement. That's where they will start from. So, cutting it, praising it, I don't think you've any grounds on highways. I just think that boat sailed, and I think 9 houses is the only thing you'll say is different, and that's not material in overall highway movement terms, certainly enough to persuade an inspector. The issues about contraflows with residents was there last time. isn't sufficient. And then I've articulated the landscape terms. You're fighting on the lower section with certainly views from one direction being a lot less than on the upper section. My advice to you would be to approve this because I think there's a substantial risk of costs on both grounds.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Neil. Councillor Whip, obviously the 2 points you made for refusal were highway safety and impact on the landscape.
Yes.
So you want to move forward and say
Okay,
that?
well, I do think that the development would create significant and demonstrable harm. And I think it's materially different in terms of its scale. It's a doubling of the number of properties, and I think that that is significant enough for us to argue the case on highway grounds. I hear what Mr Watson is saying, and councillors may come to a different view on that. In terms of the impact on the landscape, I think that the impact on people on using the footpath is substantial, and I don't think you can underplay just how popular that route is. And as I say, when I visited, and it would have been probably April time, but I can't just remember, it might have been March. When I visited it early in the year, you know, reasonably early in the morning, there was a staggering number of people using it. So the way in which the development, stuck out as it is into the local countryside, will impact on the users of that lane, I don't think can be understated. And I think the both on the highways and the landscape grounds, it's the cumulative harm that the intensification of development, the scale that causes, coming back to Mr Watson's words, that significant and demonstrable harm. So I appreciate we might be on thin ice with the highway grounds, but I would argue to the death the impact on the landscape, because I genuinely believe that this will be so harmful and utterly unacceptable.
Thank you very much. Just to come back, before I get to you, Councillor Ash, are you still happy to second that, yeah?
Certainly, we're going down to that one item, that one item for refusal. One reason for refusal.
Well, I'm, you know, I don't want to put something forward and there's a majority on the committee votes it down because, you know, we've included something. So I'm more than happy to hear what other people have got to say.
That's a fair explanation. Taking on board what Neil said.
Yeah.
I'm disappointed, obviously, and it makes you look back on the previous application and think, we should have put highways in then, you know, and continue the same thing. You know, I'm sure that we spoke about it then. I actually can't remember speaking on this application, I can't remember if I was here.
No.
But I'm certainly aware of the application previously.
Okay.
Probably would have commented, if not moved something along those lines.
No problem. Councillor Bell?
Yes. When you're asking for how can we demonstrate that it's going to have an impact, at the moment you've got 9 houses that have already been given planning, but they've not been built. So we don't have that baseline of them 9 houses being there and how these further 9 are going to have an impact. If these are built, we're not looking at that, we're looking at 18.
Yeah.
That's my baseline to what we're going to hit. So that's something I'd like to bring into consideration. But on the previous iteration for the first planning permission, the appeal did actually turn around and say for the road safety that will be for traffic regulations, and they weren't too keen on it. Well, like you say, at the time it was for 9 houses.
Yeah.
Because nothing's been built, you're up to 18 houses, and if they're saying 2 per 36 vehicles, if they're leaving at the same time, I think it's got to have an impact, and I believe there was a statement from the parish that was surrendered in, saying, I think it was the 20th of June, there was a head-on collision on Gisborne Road. And as it's been pointed out, they've put speed cameras on, so there is an awareness by county of saying there is a high floor and there is an investigation going on as why there's so many accidents. If it had just been for 9 and they'd already been built, I may be thinking a different way. But because no houses have actually been built at all yet, it's double what they've said.
Sure.
And we've got to look at baseline what we have. And I think we've really got to take that into consideration, that the impact of building 18 from scratch, because that's what it's going to be. It's not 9 we're building 18. And I think really do believe it's got to be taken into consideration, and especially the ecological on here. And in fact, it was actually mentioned about the affordability of homes, with 20% of a new build has to be affordable. It is mentioned in our report here that the first one, this was not enforced, it wasn't go through, but it's not even been mentioned here for the second lot. So affordability has been taken out, and when it says, you know, housing that's required, and the building, I presume the first 9 houses are 3-bedroom. If you can confirm that, I'm not too sure, but for these 9 that are being built, it's put down here as 3-bedroom houses.
Yeah.
Just on that point, we can't look at the inspector's decision.
I'm not too sure.
We're saying the inspector missed that, where condition 18 is recommended the 20%, which is one of unit be put in there.
So I would say it's in there for 20%, but then they say for this legal line of 3-bedroom, as Councillor Asher said, it's the requirement of that area. Are 3-bedroom houses required? There's so many of these required, especially for a small village. And for me, I think it's somebody who's being very optimistic. It's putting something in that's not actually with it. I might be wrong. In the planning, I think for the requirements needed, I think these aren't. Because of what I've seen in the village and what I've seen people coming in. We saw today with Trans Park on the road. Signs said, please be courteous, please don't lock us in. Please be courteous, leave this space clear.
Right.
But I'll stand by the reason.
Thank you, Councillor Bell. Councillor Whip, are we still happy to go with that proposal?
Well, I mean, I would stick with that proposal. I did, you know, sort of try and elicit the views of other committee members.
Sure.
You know, would they support the highway grounds or not? So, nobody said very much apart from Councillor Sutcliffe.
I just think it's a real shame that it wasn't. I wasn't involved in the previous decision. I think it's a real shame that it wasn't raised before.
Sure.
We can't revisit it. I think so many of these applications, looking at Ash, it's obvious to us because we're local people, so we know the roads. It's really obvious. I always mention this to Mr. Watson, the Folridge church development, where LCC actually said you could just drive up a pavement. That's actually against it's actually against what should be in the highway code. So we come across this a lot, and it's very sad. I suspect that if we can't raise it now, because we didn't raise it before.
Just through you, just one point, Chairman. Inspectors can do refuse on other grounds than the council, so that than the councils have raised. So the inspector has to be satisfied that the highway safety, as well as all the other things, are acceptable. So it's not just us. An inspector has said, I find that aspect of the proposal to be acceptable. So that's the two kind of layers to that precedent.
Sure. Back to Councillor Whip.
Well, Chairman, I detect a reluctance to stick with the highway grounds because it's absolutely untenable because it's trying to set the clock back. So, you know, if that's going to bring the proposal for refusal down, I would take that out.
Okay.
Reluctantly.
So we're going to just stick to the impact on the landscape then?
Yeah.
Yeah?
What about looking at Blacko as a village? I know that this is an indicative layout, we don't know what the designs are like or anything, but in terms of really what Councillor Whip was saying before about this sudden sort of protuberance, if you like, that particular part of Blacko is really, really charming and undeveloped. This is going to be a suburban development. It will affect the character of the village adversely, presumably, or can we not think about that because it's indicative only?
Chairman, I'm assuming that the landscape character and impact on the village is all part of that reason for refusal.
So we're happy to move forward with just the landscape impact. Is that okay?
Regrettably, yeah.
No problem. So Councillor Whip to propose for refusal for the impact on the landscape. Councillor Ash Sutcliffe happy to second that. All in favour for the refusal? That's fine. It's been refused. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. If you wish to... Just give us a minute to leave. Planning application 25/0177 HHO. It's an erection of a single-storey rear extension at 41 Beaufort Street in Nelson. Councillor Zaffarali?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. This one came to the Nelson Biofuels Committee. We moved for approval of the proposal. Chairman, I'm happy to stand by my original decision to move for approval, given the urgent need of this extension. Whilst I appreciate the 45-degree rule will be activated, I just think that the overbearing benefit, rather, of the disabled occupant at number 39, if I'm not mistaken. 41, sorry.
39,
yeah. Indeed, yes, thank you, I stand corrected. Would mean that we're essentially sometimes having to use a common sense approach, and the 45-degree rule to this disabled occupant is of no use. It doesn't stop the people or the occupants or the owners at number 43 from also building an extension in the future, just like number 39 has done at this moment in time, if I'm not mistaken. Whilst that might not be a suitable enough reason to Mr. Watson, we are at the end of the day in a climate where there's endless developments, especially in and around the Wolverton ward, involving the 45-degree rule. So for those reasons, as strong as I can be and set out, I'd like to propose that we move for approval of this application, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Councillor Sarah Gomez?
Nobody's going to be surprised when I say the 45-degree rule is there to protect the people next door, and it's there for a reason, and it's there across Pendle, so it affects us in Combe. If you do this in Nelson, we are bothered. And we all know that while we care about residents, then their actual circumstances, we can only take that into account if the planning balance is fine. It's fine. And that's not the case here. It genuinely isn't the case here. So I propose that this application is refused. To me, I'm afraid, is it.
Yeah, I just wanted to raise, obviously I'm the ward councillor for that particular area as well, and I just wanted to have, I think it's number 59 that's recently also had an extension put to that, and that extension has gone right to the back wall. So I clearly think that the 45-degree rule did not really be included in that either. And obviously looking at the major needs for this development for disabled reasons as well should be looked into. Councillor Belden, Councillor Ash. Thank you.
Thank you. I actually find that I'm agreeing with Councillor Sarah, because we set a precedent last month where we had to refuse an applicant for disabled use on the grounds of 45 degree. Now, if we turn round now and say, yeah, okay, we'll let this one go, we can ignore it. I can see that last month, applicant can turn round and have reasonable grounds to then appeal, and we would lose on that ground because we gave the same one reason for the same last month. We give the same on this one. Sorry, I've got a dry mouth. If we turn around and say yes to this one, they can then turn around and appeal their decision, which was a refusal. So, if the 45 degree rule is there, if there was a slightly different layout, I'd have been probably say yes, but for the layout that's been presented, I would have to second Councillor Sarah's motion.
Thank you. Councillor Astley.
Thank you, Chairman. I agree with what Councillor Bell and Councillor Coleman-Price have just said. I think you can't take the disability into account at all. I don't think that's relevant in this case. The thing that struck me on the site visits is that the extensions, as have been described, were not really extensions at all, but actually they were the old outdoor toilets or the coal holes or whatever they were used for. That were that were kind of lean-tos against the outriggers that were already there. So they might have connected to the back wall, but they weren't proper structures in the respect of this, the way that this is presented as a full extension to the property all the way out to the back wall. So I think that does make a major difference, because actually this changes the character of that completely. Even the property that has been extended up further up the street didn't go all the way to the back wall at full height. It actually dropped down at least 2-3 feet away from that back wall. So actually that does make quite a substantial difference to the way that street looks and the uniformity of it. So this will be breaking that, and of course the 45 degree rule as well. So I will be voting against this.
Sure. Councillor Yvonne Tennant?
No, I've just looked back and I was pretty sure I was right. The last month when we did an extension for a disabled person, when we passed it, we didn't refuse it.
Was that a development management or area committee? Yeah. Okay. Anybody else want to speak on this one? No? Councillor Zafrali?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. So yeah, thank you also to Councillor Tennant for enlightening me on last month's decision-making process. I'm a sub on this committee.
Yeah, sure.
That being said, I think, in my view, I stand by my original remarks. There's clearly precedent of other developments, be it to the end or not, be it that route or not. There's been no objections from the neighbouring property in this regard as well. And for me personally, whilst I'm not the councillor for the ward in question, having done the site visit and noticing, precedents of development in and around the surrounding streets as well, in my view, the overbearing impact of the 45 degree rule should be in the favour of the applicant, and in this case a disabled occupant at the property. And therefore I'm still moving for approval of the application.
Sure, I'll be happy to second that, Councillor Zafar. Anyone else happy to approve that? All in favour? That's 4. And for refusal, Councillor Sarah Corbyn-Price, you wanted to propose?
No, you can just got to take the vote now, Chairman. Okay. You can't go back to the...
for refusal?
5.
That's 5.
Refused.
That's refused. Thank you very much. Moving swiftly on, guys. Right, this is planning application 250388. It's a PRP, permission in principle, erection of up to 5 dwellings at Greenbank Farm, Greenbank Drive in Fence. I don't think we've got... Yes, we have got some... Wow, we've got 5 speakers. Thank you. The first speaker would be Luke Pringle. Is Luke here? Hi, Luke. Sorry for waiting for such a long time.
Not a problem.
Thank you.
I can't miss to say I'm not a really good speaker, not like that lady before. She was absolutely fantastic. So, so here we go. Good evening, everybody. I've lived in Fence for 16 years. So currently I have 2 properties in Fence. I have one quite central in Fence, And probably about 4 or 5 years ago, we was looking to probably a bigger property to live. So we were looking around the fence, because fence is quite beautiful. And I'm not really, how could I put it, sociable, if you will. We were half like neighbours, etc. I like to live in a field where I've not many neighbours. And we were looking around for a long period of time, and obviously fence, over the period of time, it's been developed quite heavily over the last 10 years. And like traffic, etc., etc., it's really, really bad. So when this property particularly came up, it was absolutely fantastic because it kept me other half happy with neighbours, and it was quite in the countryside, which is really, really nice, set in place in fence. So when we actually looked to purchase the property, we did always due diligence. When we did the actual due diligence on that particular property, we found there was covenants on the land surrounding all the way around. Them covenants are tied to my property. So obviously Greenbank House, originally it was dated back, it was called Boggart Hall. Boggart Hall was dated back from the Pendle Witches. So I think Pendle Witches, they hid there before they actually found them and went to Lancaster. So there's quite a lot of history. Over the years, the actual house, which is Greenbank Farm, which is now Greenbank House, has been developed. So obviously it used to be a farm. Years and years ago it was Happer. So Happer Association, which we all know currently around this area, was in fence. Over the years Happer grew and grew, and obviously it grew quite large that it moved from fence to where it is now. The lady, Pam Woods, who used to own all the land and my house, obviously when she got older she started to actually move down, if you will, scale things down. So my house obviously was the original farmhouse. So over the years it was Greenbank Barn, the small barn got developed, Greenbank Hay, and then Greenbank Farm, which was the old piggery where Pam Woods used to live before she just passed away. Over them years the covenants have been in place since 1930, and when we did our due diligence on our particular house, the actual house the covenants got reinstated on the full grounds in 1993. So the covenants are in place. So the covenants cannot be built upon because it's greenbelt land. That particular land was still active, so just recently to a farmer who's been there all his life, grazing sheep, farms, animals, etc., etc., was given notice for this particular development, and it was a still active site for farming, which I do believe obviously farmers still need to raise the cattle, etc., etc. The particular area in fence as it is now, it is stressed. Buses struggle getting through fence, the school times, kids, it's absolutely crazy with traffic, etc., etc. Obviously this is quite near the school and down the actual where the road is, and I think for the actual 5 properties plus 1, which is the new dwelling, which is the actual bungalow 6, I think it's too intense for the actual particular site, especially because it's coming to a cul-de-sac. The cul-de-sac legally, what is it, 5.5 metres wide, and then it goes down to under 4 metres to go into the actual access, and the actual particular access into the site, if you can look on the map, it's shared by a lot of residents. So straight away I've got 2 young children and they're walking down, and there's going to be a lot of safety problems in that area. And here, why I'm here tonight, you see, is just really just to say I object to this for these reasons really. One with the covenants, and the other one as well is Pam Woods. Pam Woods passed away and she left the estate to somebody else. Obviously somebody else has come along and wanting to develop onto this particular land. For 40 years, she's fought off developers knocking on a door to develop that land. Because why? Because she wanted to keep it for greenery. She wanted to keep it because there's not many places in fence when you drive through now where it's greenery. She wanted to keep it for greenery. And that's where I am now really. I know there's some concerns about grey belt. This new, obviously, Labour's come in, introduced grey belt. But I strongly believe it is greenbelt. It's a really nice property. If it got sold, it probably be 600, 700, probably £800,000. somebody could have animals there, etc. But I do think it's too intense, that site, for what it is there, for the actual, all them houses there. So I really, really thank you very much for listening to me. And I'm not a right good speaker, so I apologise again. Thank you, thank you.
Brilliant, thank you very much. Can I have Jane Thieker, please?
Yeah.
Thank
Okay,
you, Jane.
thank you. Okay, so I've written a few notes, so if you don't mind if I just read from there. So, evening everybody, Chair, Councillors, members of the committee. My name is Jane Thieker. I live at Greenbank Hay, directly next door to the proposed site, with my husband and teenage son. I'm here to explain why this application should be refused because of the harm it would cause to the whole village of Fence, as well as to my immediate neighbours and myself. Firstly, Greenbelt. The site is designated Greenbelt. That designation exists to protect countryside, preserve the openness and prevent urban sprawl. If you approve this, you will set a dangerous precedent for expansion from the village towards Noggath Road, swallowing up the fields and eroding the rural character that makes Fence unique. Once lost Greenbelt cannot be restored. Secondly, highways and parking. Greenbank Drive is already difficult to access and egress. In winter it's untreated and therefore often covered in ice, making it difficult to negotiate without fear of sliding into the parked vehicles on either side on the pavement and the road. And on occasion it's impassable without a four-wheel drive vehicle. Parking from the village also spills onto it, creating blind spots from double parking at junctions. The bin lorry can't reach the top of our road, and there are serious concerns about emergency access. Wheatley Lane Road also creates problems, especially at school drop-off and pick-up times. Traffic and parking reduces it to a single lane, creating risks for both vehicles and pedestrians. Adding more houses will only worsen safety problems. Thirdly, lack of clarity. This application is vague. Are we talking about 5 dwellings, or is it 6 if the bungalow is to be kept? What type, what scale or design? Without accurate and transparent plans, residents cannot properly understand the impact, and the committee cannot make a fair decision. To grant permission without clarity would not be in the public interest. Fourth, covenants. When I bought my property, covenants and boundaries, access rights, parking and land to be used were checked. I was assured they are legally binding and include restrictions on development of this land. To ignore them now undermines the planning process. Fifth, impact on neighbours. My house is directly affected. The drawing suggests homes being built on existing structures. This is not true. They are shown on the boundary, less than 2 metres from my garden and side house wall, blocking my long-established side access to the service road used by Greenbank Hay, Greenbank Barn and Greenbank Drive to access the rear of our properties. The land itself is unstable. Surface water runs down the hill into long-established land drains, which prevented flooding for decades. These are underground and no one's unsure where they run. Disturbing them risks flooding and damage. The ground levels are irregular and unsupported, and if disturbed could destabilise the nearby buildings, including my house, the bungalow and the private road. 6. Fairness. When I applied for a small granny annex for an extension, it took years, cost me thousands, and came with strict conditions after going to appeal on numerous occasions. All to ensure it was in keeping, yet this large-scale, poorly defined scheme appears to escape the same scrutiny. This is inconsistent and unfair. Finally, wildlife. These fields are home to butterflies, buzzards, lapwings, owls, deer and bats. Bats residing in our buildings and the farm. Buildings here will destroy habitats and cannot be replaced. Fence's rural identity depends on protecting these aspects. In conclusion, this application is contrary to Greenbelt policy, vague in its details, harmful to neighbours, risky in terms of drainage and stability, destructive to wildlife, unsafe for highways and in conflict with existing covenants. Fence deserves careful, sensitive, sustainable planning, not speculative, development that risks permanent harm to our community. I urge the committee to refuse this application. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Jane. We have Rick Keeker.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rick.
Just for the benefit of good housekeeping, I'm Jane's husband, not a teenage son. Hence the glasses. Well, good evening, Chair and Councillors. I'm sorry if I repeat some of the things because I didn't know what Luke had prepared. My name is Rick Thieker. I live at Greenbank Hay, directly adjoining the proposed development site. I'm here to strongly object to this application. First, a little context. This site is not just a piece of land, it is part of a beautiful stone enclave of homes that was once Greenbank Farm. The late Pam Wood, who purchased the farm in the 1970s, developed it sensitively over many years, maintaining its green belt designation and protecting its character. From this site, she founded the Horses and Ponies Protection Association, which is known as HAPA, where hundreds of horses, ponies and donkeys were rescued and cared for until the charity outgrew the land and relocated. Mrs. Wood's legacy is more than history, it is safeguarded by legal covenants. When I purchased Greenbank Hay in 2001, the conveyance process took almost a year because my solicitors had to verify the existence of strong covenants. These covenants were specifically designed to protect the land's greenbelt status, prevent development and safeguard access and egress and parking for the 3 Greenbank properties. Without those legal protections confirmed, we would never have been able to complete the purchase. This application ignores those protections. It is wholly contrary to both the letter and the spirit of the covenants. It is also contrary to planning policy. It is greenbelt land. National and local planning policy is clear. Development on greenbelt is only permitted in very special circumstances. This application, in my opinion, does not meet the test. It harms the character of the area. This is a sensitive enclave of converted farm buildings, integral to the village setting. A profit-driven development here would destroy that character. It sets a dangerous precedent. If this development is allowed, it opens the door for further erosion of protected land in this part of the borough. Beyond policy, I want to stress the personal side. I knew Mrs. Wood for over 20 years. In her later years, I cared for her daily. She confided in me with what she had rejected repeated offers from developers, sometimes for very significant sums. Because she was adamant that this land would always remain for farming and animal welfare, she believed the covenants and greenbelt protections were robust enough to secure that. I understand that the current beneficiaries may be motivated by financial return, but that is not a valid planning consideration. What is relevant is that this proposal runs directly against the long-standing protections in place, the character of the greenbelt, and the planning policies you are here to uphold. In summary, this application should be reviewed because it is inappropriate development in the greenbelt, it breaches existing legal covenants, and nearly finished. It is out of keeping with the character of the site and surrounding village. It undermines public trust in the planning system, which is meant to protect sensitive sites like this from speculative development. I urge you, councillors, to refuse this application and honour both the planning policies you are bound to apply and the spirit of protection that has safeguarded this land for decades. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much. If there's Jackie Heaps, Jackie, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
I don't know if you're aware, but the response, it says, on this application from the parish council said, well, there is no response from the parish council. I don't know if you were aware but we didn't have a parish council at the time of this, but practically apart from 3, and without the help of Barrowford and Westons, we wouldn't have a parish council now. We've had to reinstate, we had to vote a new council in, co-opt a new council, who are very inexperienced, and that is why there is no response from the parish council, because there weren't one. It wasn't that they think it's all right, so they don't have any objections. I'm just wondering why the hospice only of the applicants, because I believe this was left to 2 sets of benefactors. I think one might be East Lancs Trust, so I would question why it is just the hospice that are applying for this. And I just like to point out, Greenbelt, it's been mentioned quite a bit. This is just destruction of Greenbelt. Round Fence and Wheatley Lane, which are 2 villages, this is the Wheatley Lane village. It's very busy, and round there we do have the green belt, but we're losing quite a lot of it. We're now going to have to, at some point, accept the industrial estate coming up to the bypass. We just lost some on appeal for a silly battery, lithium battery application, thanks to somebody who doesn't know the area but probably care about it, thinking it would be a good idea. Ruining Greenbelt, valuable Greenbelt farmland. And now this, like this, roosters have been also around Greenbelt. That's been approved. That won't stop at the houses that's been approved. No developer stops at 8 to 6 houses, just like this one. It's just setting a precedent for a lot more. And Wheatley Lane runs right down to Barrowford and becomes Thomas Street. We're already affected by the traffic in Barrowford. At school time, you can't move on Wheatley Lane because of all the traffic, and they want to avoid the roundabouts in Barrowford, and they come racing up Wheatley Lane, down onto Carr Road, down through the village junctions and onto the bypass, anything to avoid the traffic. And this is before the development in Barrowford's finished. The other thing is, we've only got 1 school. I know you're saying schools don't come into it, but they do. They do come into it, or they should come into it. And I've listened to you, you've all spent nearly 3 hours, or you have spent 3 hours, only to be told by your chief planning officer that you can't object to some things. Your last but 1 application in Blackall, why didn't the planning officer advise you that you should put in the objection there to traffic and the amount of traffic in that junction? And now you can't remember, or you aren't aware of it, but he should have advised you then. I believe planning officers are advising these applicants. Why aren't the planning officers standing up for our green belt? We're not going to have any green belt right through. And as for your core strategy and your planning framework, you're then saying, you're then being told that you've got to provide land for the next 5 years, or it looks like the next 10 years. There was a meeting here above a month ago, and the inspectorate couldn't decide. It was about the Cone application, wanting to keep a green space. But that land, he couldn't decide, because you might have to go into 2040 now. Well, how is it that we can't say, if you build 5 houses, allow 5 houses, you're going to end up with 30 on it? We are not allowed to say that. You can't set that. But yet you can, the inspectorates or the people above us, above you all, can say, oh, you've got to provide this land. What happens if there's another COVID? There might be an outbreak. A lot of people might not be here. You might need any houses. They'll all be empty. And just on your planning how you've got to gauge it, proposals should follow the settlement hierarchy approach to policy SDP2 and minimise the need to travel by ensuring that they are developed in appropriate locations, close existing locations, close to services. We've got 1 shop and a post office that opens when it feels like it sometimes. We did have an ironing shop, we've got 1 school, and we've got hairdressers. And yet in Nelson, you've got Scott's old joinery place on Charles Street, Stub Barron, Wilman's at the back of it on Reedy Ford Road. There's a nursery up Marsden Road and Barker House Road. All them places have been knocked down and they're just empty, wide open spaces. Nobody's looking at them, and yet you're told you have to provide affordable housing. I couldn't afford one of these houses in Fence, and I've lived there for 30-something years. Who's going to buy them? Only people that's going to have a car and need to... They're not going to get on the bus that occasionally runs. You need to really think, and as for a government telling you you can't do this or you might get fines, get some backbone and stand up to them. This government now needs standing up to, because you won't have a country, you won't have any green fields. It's just ridiculous what they're getting away with. So please, I'm asking you to really consider all these points, and when you make the decision, please refuse. Thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you very much for your precious time, Jackie. I do really appreciate what you said there as well. But obviously, we've got to give credit to our staff that work for the council as well. They were day and night to obviously try and get this process ongoing. But and credit to councillors who come to committee meetings, and because of opportunities that obviously council officers give us. So this is what we do in terms of following local plans as well. But it's a process that we follow, so we have to respect that as well. So, you know, we don't, you know, they give us this opportunity, and we've obviously fulfilled this, and we try and engage with local communities and local organisations, and hopefully try and come out with some kind of resolve. This is a typical opportunity that we have given to residents, to agents as well, with all credit to our officers as well. So we've got to give them credit as well. I do appreciate that.
Said we're going to lose that. So
well, we're currently talking about the current term as well. But just to move forward with the current process, if you let us do that, we've got Lee Greenwood here, who's the agent who wants to talk on behalf of the
Thank you, Chair. I'll only speak briefly. We note and welcome the contents of the case officer's report, which retains a recommendation for approval, despite the resolution of the Area Committee to refuse the application on the 6th of August 2025. At that meeting, officers advised members that the suggested refusal, which was predicated on impacts on the Greenbelt, would represent a significant risk of costs being awarded against the council in an appeal scenario. Accordingly, the submission was referred to this committee for a final decision. As you'll be aware, this is an application for permission in principle. As such, the scope is limited to the three issues of location, land use and the amount of development proposed. With regard to location, the site benefits from policy support via two different Greenbelt exceptions, with the first being the allowance for limited infilling in villages. The site is surrounded on three sides by existing built form and has a clear and tangible relationship with the settlement, therefore satisfying this requirement. In addition to this long-standing infilling exception, the site also now benefits from grey belt allowances following the introduction of an updated suite of national policies when the framework was revised in December 2024. It is evident that the government expects sites such as this to contribute to future housing supply, as reflected in this new approach to the Green Belt, and also by way of those existing exceptions which apply in these circumstances. Members considered the matter of grey belt in some detail at the Area Committee. However, even in the event that this committee comes to the conclusion that the site doesn't fall within that definition, despite our submissions and your officer's recommendation, the separate allowance for limited infilling by way of paragraph 154E of the framework remains and provides clear policy support for future development. In relation to land use, the proposals relate solely to residential development, and in terms of the amount proposed, the indicative plan shows a possible scheme of up to 5 dwellings, but this will obviously be subject to detailed consideration at the second stage of the process. It is noted that a range of third-party comments have been made in writing and here tonight, which are addressed comprehensively in the officer's report, and those of which there are material considerations have been found to be policy compliant. Any other matters will be subject to a full assessment at the technical details consent stage and are not in themselves a reason to withhold permission in principle. In light of all these factors, we please ask that you endorse the recommendation of your officers and approve the application this evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lee. Thank you very much. Councillor Whip.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to just ask Mr Watson about covenants and whether they are a material planning consideration that we need to take account of.
Chairman, I appreciate it's very important for individuals if there are covenants on there, but they are a civil matter. They're separate to planning considerations. We can't take, as local planning authorities, covenants into consideration. Doesn't mean to say were planning permission to be granted, it overrides a covenant. It doesn't. Covenants are still there, and if they prevent a development coming forward, it's for the people who benefit from those covenants to take that action. So that's a long way down to saying no.
Yeah. Okay. A further question to Mr. Watson, and it's about the sustainability of this location, because the only thing that we can consider, and Mr. Greenwood pointed this out, is the principle of development. But I think sustainability is an aspect of that principle. So what about sustainability? Is that an argument that we can bring into play in a PIP?
Chairman, that would be looking at the traffic impacts, etc. As Mr. Greenwood said, I'm not in cahoots with him, by the way, on this, but it's only looking at location, land use and amount. That's all the local authority can look at, so sustainability isn't one of those criteria. The traffic impacts will be for the technical details consent stage work committee to approve this. That's just the way the legislation's set up. It doesn't allow those kind of detailed considerations to be looked at here. So the answer is no, in my view. That's not an issue for this stage of the process.
Okay, thank you very much. As has been pointed out, we are considering a planning in principle, which is a mechanism that was brought in by the last government, which I think is regrettable, because as someone pointed out, you don't get any details with it, and you're not able to judge things in terms of the highway, anything like that. So I had a bit of a pop at the current government, and I'm more than happy to give the last government a good kick in as well, because I think they're all making a hash of planning policy. But I want to stick to something that is a matter of principle, and that is the green belt. And I appreciate the point that Mr. Greenwood made about the argument that this could be construed to be infill, and the argument that it could be considered to be grey belt. But I think the fact of the matter is that it is designated green belt, and that is something that we should respect. So I would propose that we do turn this one down as a matter of principle, because it is in the green belt.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bell.
Yeah, thank you. I actually second what Councillor Up's put forward.
So Councillor Up, you're proposing that, were you?
Yes.
Yeah, that's fine.
And just to go on to a couple of things, the about the covenants, I say it's unfortunate we can't take into consideration planning. But when you say that it's been mentioned that the land was bequeathed to two different parties, right? One's come up, it's a civil situation, you need to inform the other party to say, have you been informed, because there's covenants in place, because it's legally binding. So that's something we can't do, we can't enforce, we can't do anything with it, unfortunately. Because it's in a green belt, that's why I agree that it shouldn't be put on top. But then I'm reading on page 34 for the Mining Remediation Authority, where it does state in there, it may be subject to unrecorded shallow workings causing potential risks to surface stability and safety. And I'd like that to be taken into consideration as well as being green belts.
Okay. Okay, that's fine. Councillor Sarah Corbyn-Price, please.
I'm going to be the spectre of doom. I'm going to bring in the Ides of March. I'm very sad about it, and the experience that we have at Cone Area Committee, and quite often with Mr Greenwood actually, in Laneshire Bridge. And so we've had several applications for limited infill in a village, and it clearly, from the last government, is one of the exceptions of Greenbelt that negates the magical Greenbelt status. So the irritation that I always have with Commission in Principle, which is that it's sneaky and unfair, goes without saying. I always say it though. And yes, the last government is to blame for it, but it's not nearly as grievous as Angela Rayner's marriage at Cana, water into wine of Greybelt. And if it wasn't for Gaza and Palestine and Ukraine and Russia, there would be marches and people all over the country who are affected by this happening to them, because it is the magic way to turn Greenbelt into building land. Only one policy of the 5 purposes is looked at, and assuredly, not only is this an exception within the NPPF, previous government, and one of those exceptions, 154E, that it is that infill in villages, which this clearly is. The map shows those houses there on the left and those houses on the right. That is infill. But in addition, Angela Rayner has got her boot in and magic this into Greybelt as well. But it's, in fact, you don't need to. But I do want to not just end on a complete down, because you do have something. You have something in your armoury, perhaps not tonight, but I don't think so, which is the covenants. So we also have experience in Cone, both in Cone and in Trawton, where people have had covenants either on land or for access. And we have had to grant at Cone Area Committee, we've granted planning approval. And the people, obviously looking sad when they leave the room, but they can then take that up. They can take up their covenants and enact them. And that has happened successfully in Cone. And in the places that I'm talking of, there are no houses. We're talking years. These houses that we have passed planning approval for have not been built, because the covenants can be enacted. So in a sense, although Mr Watson has said it needs to be set to one side, it absolutely does in this room. We need to set it to one side. It is powerful for you. You have that. It is something that's worth something. It's not worth something in this room, but it's definitely worth something. But I'm afraid, based on the exception of the limited infill in villages, followed by the Greybelt, I have to propose approval, not through joy or happiness or belief, but just because that's the system, but also feeling quite secure that by proposing approval, you can enact the covenants and stop that building from happening.
Thank you. Councillor Yvonne Tennant.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you, as in these PIPs are just awful. Yeah, it's like putting the cart before the horse. We're asked to decide on something when we haven't got the details, which I think is terrible. But I picked up on the mining remediation thing as well. And again, it's the wanting us to put the cart before the horse. Well, this has just made me think of Further Clough Head, which I know is going to, which had outline planning permission donkeys years ago, and then the building work still hasn't been able to start because they're finding mine shafts.
No, they're not finding mine shafts.
Oh yeah, actually, right, they're not finding mine shafts. They know they're there, but the building's been delayed for years. Which has costed, I would imagine, the developers and the council an awful lot of money to try and remedy that. So I think with something like this, it's going to cost the developers and the council an awful lot of money to look for it. So if they're saying that costs could be awarded in the case of an appeal. I think it would probably cost more to actually try and remedy the situation, to find out about mines and whatever, which might not be, it might not be a thing relevant to this PIP, but I can't in all honesty support this at all. A, because I don't like PIPs, and two, because, well...
Okay. Councillor Nadeem Ahmed.
Thank you. Yeah, I think we're all in agreement none of us like PIPs, but I think my view is I think we have to take a stand, and I know it's difficult in terms of the policies that's changed, but I think as councillors we are in a difficult position, but I would say I think I would urge council like we did at the area committee, it was a unanimous decision to refuse the application based on precisely the reasons which Councillor Whip has put forward this evening.
I'm not quite clear why, if I'm being honest, why development in Greenbelt is a matter of principle. How Greenbelt policy works, it says inappropriate developments in Greenbelt is unacceptable. Therefore, because it automatically harms the openness. If it's not inappropriate development, it doesn't impact on the Greenbelt, therefore Greenbelt can't be used as a reason for refusal. So it then sets out a series of exceptions to that. So one of which is infilling. If you agree that it's infilling, if you don't, then that's another matter. Then you have to look at whether it's grey belt. But if it's infilling, it says it doesn't harm the green belt. So if we agree that it's infilling, we wouldn't even be able to contest it at appeal because it wouldn't be inappropriate development. So that's what I'm struggling with, because it's.
I'm not agreeing that it's infill.
Well, that's what we need to clarify. If it's not, then you have to look at grey belt and why, because there might be different exceptions to that inappropriate development. So you would have to then look at each of the policy tests, including whether it's grey belt. For me, I think it's classic infill. You know, built up on three sides, not extending beyond the rear of the houses, a relatively small gap, similar to what we've approved elsewhere.
Lancashire Bridge repeatedly.
Yeah, it's a difficult one to suggest it's not.
Can I ask a question just for
clarification?
clarification? Just for clarification, right, they mentioned about grey belts, but I'm looking up there and it says it's green belts. So how do we differentiate then by saying it may be grey belts?
Unfortunately, because we haven't done no one has in the country. Grey belt is a new concept that came in last December, formally came in. No one's done we've got some money from government to do the assessment, which is going to start after the local plan. You have to look at the characteristics of whether it's grey belt, but it can be any one of the exceptions. So first, the easiest one to look at, to be honest with you, because grey belt has more, you have to assess it more in more depth. And no one's really defined which parcels are grey belt, because we've done a green belt assessment, but it looks at larger parcels of land. We're going to have to go down to more individual parcels. But the easiest one to look at, and the one that I think is pretty straight, if I'm honest, pretty straightforward in a planning sense, is whether it's infill. So if it's infill, you don't have to look at grey belt. If it's not infill in your view, you have to look at grey belt. And grey belt, then it says whether it harms any one of three criteria. I think it's A, C and D. I think I'd have to just check that in here. In terms of paragraph 143, check the unrestricted spoil of built up areas, etc. And that is mentioned in the report at paragraphs. It's on page 39. So there is an assessment of that within this, so you would have to look and disagree with that. Which you can do, obviously, but if you don't look at infilling and you don't agree, then you have to also look at the grey belt issue. You can't escape that because clearly an appeal will come in based on that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, in terms of the argument that it's infill, I would contend that there is only existing development on two sides, and the one side, going up the hill, the existing properties are quite a long way away. So, where's the three sides?
Through you, Chairman, it's the curtilage which will define that that's a planning unit. So you go up to the planning unit, and the curtilage is contiguous with the boundary of the pit.
Sure.
But the green belt doesn't have. Sorry, the section within the green belt doesn't have development on three sides.
Well, Chairman, you've got the house that's part of the application site, which if you're looking at development in adjacent to Greenbelt, I don't actually agree with that argument because I think that it's the whole site, but there is a house already as part of immediately to the northeast side of the Greenbelt.
Yeah. Moving forward, Councillor Ash Sutcliffe.
Thank you, Chairman. I don't like any of this. Just the comments about it have already been made. But as we look at this, and I'm sort of, every day is a school day, isn't it? When we're councillors, we seem to be learning something new every day, and then the policies change, we learn something else. And in this case, it's the green belt, grey belt thing that's that is new to us. And at area committee with Alex Cameron last week, we learned an awful lot about grey belts because of the situation in Lancashire Bridge there. Now, my argument there, or our argument there, was that is green belts. We would class it as green belts. We would argue that until we were blue in the face. But actually, when you look at the tests and you have to go through those, it had to be assessed as being grey belt, whether we liked it or not, because it failed to meet those tests. And this particular parcel of land is probably fails those tests, even further than the one at Lancashire Bridge. I understand your argument of saying it's only developed on the two sides rather than three. Well, the one in Lancashire Bridge definitely was only two sides, and that was designated as grey belt. And my irritation is that we're making these ad hoc designations on grey belt at the moment because we don't have a fully fledged strategy to address grey belt. If we did, we might be making different designations on the different parcels of land as they come forward. If we had an overall strategy for Pendle, that's a different thing altogether. But if we argue that it doesn't, or that it remains green belt, we've still got that infill thing, and I cannot see anything other than infill there. And it's very difficult. It is infill, and unfortunately that policy still stands. If it didn't, and we were only assessing this as being grey belt or green belt, then I might say something else. But I think that we are absolutely stuck between a rock and a hard place, just as we were at Colne Area Committee approving the PIP in Lancashire Bridge. We hated doing that there. The residents absolutely understood what we did, understood why we had to make the decision that we did, because that's the law of how things sit under the National Planning Policy Framework, and therefore I will incredibly reluctantly, but because I think we have to, second Councillor Colburn Price's motion.
No problem, that's fine. So if we'll move forward with Councillor Sarah Corbyn Price's approval, ask to second that. All in favour for the approval? And the refusal? Got 3. Thank you very much. That's approved. Thank you. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you very much for your time.
Well done, Chairman.
Can I ask a question now?